So welcome to yet another panel for the Galaxy's Greatest 45 Years of 2000 AD, and I'm your host, Malchar. And on this panel, we're talking to four relatively newly minted art droids about what it means to draw for 2000 AD, how they approach their work, and to really talk about the kind of next generation of 2000 AD creators. So it's an absolute privilege to welcome my four guests, starting off with Tom Foster.
Hello.
Korinna Mei Veropoulou.
Hi.
Anna Morozova.
Hello.
And Dan Cornwell.
How you doing?
Wonderful. Well, welcome everybody. Like I say, I wanted this panel to kind of get to know you guys, introduce you guys to everybody, talk about your work for 2000 AD, whether it's small or large, and get a sense of the future for 2000 AD in terms of art and techniques and style and how it plugs into this great legacy of the past 4.5 decades. I think I'm going to come to Dan first of all, because Dan, you've got a story running in the prog at the moment, which is Judge Dredd's Citadel, which is written by the mighty John Wagner. You've got quite a close connection with John, and that relates to how you've come into 2000 AD, doesn't it? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
John had a project on the go, and he was on the lookout for an artist. So he was apparently professionals charge too much. So he was after someone who's cheap, and I'm notoriously cheap. But he saw my work in Dog Breath, the fanzine, the 2000 AD fanzine, and he sent me a message asking if I'm interested in football at all, which I was. I thought it was a joke at the time. I thought someone had spammed my Facebook Messenger or something, because when you see a message saying John Wagner on it, and I was driving a bus at the time, not looking at the message driving a bus, but I was driving a bus at the time, and I saw this message from John Wagner. But obviously I said yes, I'm into football, I can draw football. So he took me on as an artist on Rock of the Reds, and latterly Rock the God. To work with someone like John, who's one of the founding fathers, if you like, of 2000 AD, was insane, really. It was really insane. It was not something I could have ever imagined. But once we'd done Rock of the Reds, at the 40th bash, he introduced me to Matt Smith, Tharg. And well, I say he introduced me to Matt Smith. Apparently, John was doing the panel and he sent Matt over to the table that John was at, and I was just sitting there minding his table for him. And Matt said, "Oh, John says you'd like to work for 2000 AD," which I did. And he goes, "Okay, we'll get you on something then." And I was like, "Is that official?" He said, "Yep." And obviously, as soon as Matt left, straight onto social media, posting it everywhere. But yeah, it's not the normal route into comics, getting to work with someone off the bat, John Wagner, and I've been here ever since. That's 5 years ago now, strangely. Do you pinch yourself? Yeah. Every day. When I sit there and I'm reading the script from whomever it's from, and I'm sitting there reading it, most of the time it's Judge Dredd I'm drawing, which is the character. It's one of those characters that I've always drawn, as in when I was a boy, I used to draw Judge Dredd all the time, poorly. But yeah, whenever I'm sitting there with a script, and I still remember the first Judge Dredd page for a story called Warbuds I did, and I think the first image of Judge Dredd I drew officially was his backside. I'm pretty sure it was his backside, the back of Judge Dredd. But even that, I was sitting there going, "Oh my God, I'm doing this for real. This is an official Judge Dredd story I'm doing." And again, that was John Wagner's story. But it is unreal when you've read it for as long as I have, and I was quite a late comer to becoming a comic. Most comic artists start off relatively young, and I'm in my 40s and start to work for 2000 AD. I've read it for such a long time, and then to 30 years later to get that dream, that break is it's living a dream, basically, living a dream.
Wonderful. Anna, I want to come to you next because you're everyone on this panel's route was slightly different coming into 2000 AD. Do you want to explain a little bit about how you came to be working for
Mine was a gamble. Really, my way was such a gamble. The common assumption is that new artists come through the thought bubble competition. So this is something I usually get when people go, you've completed the competition. I was like, no. By complete accident, I ended up doing digital interaction course at the university in Scotland. And my final degree project involved mixing comics and technology. In fact, it was comics and augmented reality. And I happened to show it to Philip Won, who at the time ran Masters of Comics at Dundee University, just because I thought he might be interested in it and maybe we could potentially take this project somewhere else. But he said, I've actually got this Masters in Comics program, MDes, and it's funded. Would you like to join? And that was a gamble because at that point I was also offered a job in a financial company doing UX UI, or I could pursue a dream with no guarantees at all and do comics. And my heart told me to do comics. And at that time, I just thought that I could use that year to actually develop a sequential portfolio because everybody here knows that, just doing standalone pictures is a skill in its own right, but sequential art is a little bit different and it requires a little bit different set of skills, which at that time I didn't have. So that was really good practice. And at that time, again, Philip Won had an amazing idea, and he thought, we might as well actually contact 2018 and offer them like a live project thing, so that students get the chance to illustrate future shocks, and maybe Matt Smith could give them feedback, because it's really great when you actually get to work with people from the industry, when it's not just kind of conservated in the university, it's just kind of academic environment, because people need the access to the actual professional environment too. And so Phil grabbed essentially work of the students and sent it to Matt Smith to say, this is what we do. Are you interested in doing something next year, like providing us a script? Apparently the same day, Matt Smith got back to him and was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go for it. By the way, who's this Anna girl? Because he saw my work. And he said, I might actually contact her once she finishes the course to see if she's up for doing a future show. And he did. And since then, I've been working for them as well. And I couldn't be more thrilled. And I couldn't be a happier person, honestly.
Excellent. That's always nice to hear. Tom, I want to come because Anna just mentioned the thought bubble competition, which is for those who don't know, it's the annual convention now in Harrogate, and we run a couple of competitions, one for writers and one for artists. And the artist one is portfolio, and you draw a sample script, and then a panel of creators tear it to pieces in front of what used to be a live audience. Tell us a little bit about your experience with that and your experience now working for 2018.
I entered the first one in 2011. I did okay. I sort of got, I didn't win, but I got a kind of honorable mention. I was one of the people where at the end, when they asked the judges, who are you going to go for? There was a couple of people said, oh, well, I like that Tom guy, but, he's not ready. Well, that's fine. And then second year came right down to the wire, as I'm sure you remember, Mike. But they needed that room for other events, and so it had to be decided somehow. So it was put to an audience vote, which was sort of I don't even know if that's what decided it or whether I don't know.
Sheer cruelty on my part. I apologize.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It doesn't matter that the person who won then subsequently turned down the commission. It's fine. But then third year, 2013, I entered it and won. And that was great. And I had it was a very I was kind of raised by TV and movies and things, so I have this expectation of like what the arc of my life is going to be like. And obviously it doesn't normally play out the way that you might expect, but something like that, after having been trying to kind of get into comics for such a long time and not being successful, but also really not being motivated enough and stuff, and kind of just like fannying about, not doing enough work, because I didn't really see a path into it. I couldn't, it felt like the people who got opportunities to do stuff like that were working in a different set of circumstances. And I was in a world where stuff never really materialized. But then of course, as soon as you actually get the kind of victory and you get in, you think, well, it's totally accessible. It's fine. I don't know why everybody's complaining. And so like now that I'm through the door, it does seem like there was a path from where I was, like a very accessible path that other people could take, but it really doesn't feel that way until you've got some hard evidence, like until you get your first commission. It never really feels like it's going to happen. Because I would do the convention circuit before that. I would like go speak to editors, get advice from other artists and things. And you would get kind words, but there was never a sense that they were actually looking to hire anybody. So when the competition came along and there was a very strong sense, well, the first year actually there wasn't the carrot of actual paid commission at the end of it, but it just seemed like a good opportunity to get seen. But then from the second year onwards, that was the prize was to actually get in the comic. So from that point on, I kind of set my sights on that, and it paid off. And again, like everybody else, it seems, I got my first job, and then that's I've not really ever been out of work since then, which is crazy. And that's the one bit that exceeded my ridiculous expectations on what my comics career might be like. There was never a point where I thought, right, well, you get your first like 4-page story or whatever, and then that's it for the next 8 years, 9 years, whatever. You're not going to be out of work. That would just seem completely unrealistic.
I had a similar thought when John got me the Judge Dredd story, the first Judge Dredd story. I thought that was I got that purely off of John's back, if you know what I mean. I thought he twisted Matt's arm and then gave me that job, and I thought once I'd done that, that's the last I'd hear from them, because Matt said, "Look, John, I've done you a favour. I gave him some work, and we're going to leave him now." I didn't think I'd get any more after that.
I mean, there is quite a big pool of talent who work for 2000 AD, and to keep all those people in work all the time, I don't know how they do it, on like one weekly title and one monthly title. And yet it's very rare that you'll hear like a regular 2000 AD artist talking about how they haven't had a gig in a while or whatever. Not people like, there's like a group of maybe, I don't know what, 40, 50 artists who just seem to have work on all the time. And with somebody like me, because I'm so slow, I guess that makes some sense. But there's people who are way faster than me, who're like putting out so much content that it's a wonder that there's enough to go around. But it's great. Like it's amazing.
That makes me so happy to hear.
I was just about to say that. Korinna sat there going, "Oh, well, this sounds great."
No problem.
Yeah, that's okay.
As the newest droid, I mean, Korinna, your path into this is completely different itself, because your work is going straight into a graphic novel. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your the strip that you've been working on?
Yeah, so it was actually complete dumb luck. It was actually my friend Ramsey, who's also the writer who worked with me on Harlem Heroes, that got me into it, because I think he was talking with our editor Olivia Hicks, trying to kind of figure out how to approach the Harlem Heroes reboot, which is, if you don't know, it's an original 2000 AD strip from the 70s that was drawn by Dave Gibbons. And it's basically like a sci-fi sports comic. And for the first time ever, Ramsey got asked if he had an artist to recommend, and he recommended me, which was just perfectly timed, because up until then, I've mostly, like, this is my first like proper like published gig. And up until that point, I'd been doing mostly self-published work, worked on a couple anthologies with other people that ended up getting published by companies, but it was still like indie publishers and stuff. So up until then, I had pretty much like, it had been 5-6 years that I was doing the comics thing, like doing the convention circuit, doing all of the self-publishing thing. And I wasn't really, I felt like I wasn't going anywhere. And then, I don't know, I think it must have been written in the stars, because on the day that I decided, okay, that's it, I'm quitting comics, that's when Ramsey asked me, he was like, hey, do you want to work on this thing with me? And I was like, yeah, of course. And then, yeah, after I like half an hour later, I get an email from 2000 AD, and I was like, oh, this is actually happening.
I mean, that's a perfect place to kind of move on to questions of legacy, because you're working on Harlem Heroes, which is one of the launch strips of 2000 AD, and you know, very much 2000 AD royalty in terms of the original creative team. Looking at something like that, I mean, I make a complete guess here that you don't necessarily have an awful lot of exposure to 2000 AD, but correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're right. Yeah, I didn't really read it until I moved to London at like age 19, like 18, 19. And that's the first time that I kind of like got to actually read the physical comic. Because up until then, like I'd only watched the Dredd movie, which I loved. And after that, I was like, ooh, okay. So like Judge Dredd is a legit kind of character that goes back many, many years. And yeah, I always had my sights kind of like, I was like, 2000 AD looks like the coolest company to kind of draw for. So I was very excited.
Flattery will get you absolutely everywhere. The question I wanted to ask was how you approached, because for those who haven't seen it by the time this goes out, your style your style is different to Dave Gibbons. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So I wanted to get a sense of how you approached your style on the strip, how much you either plugged into or looked away from the original, you know, because it is a reboot, it is a refresh. So I wanted to get an idea of your ideas around that.
I did like start by looking at the original like strip, and I kind of had a bit of an idea of where I wanted to go with it, because I think like for me representation was the most important thing, because I mean my writer Ramsey is Black, but I'm not, so it was very, very important to me that I kind of get the characters right and get them like as diverse looking, but making it as realistic as possible, but still kind of like creating a really fun and iconic cast of characters. So it was very like, I think I tackled it quite practically in the sense that I was like, okay, so how, because the original strip, generally the characters tend to look quite the same. They all have the same body type, and the kind of uniforms that they wore were quite like uniform. They were quite the same. So I wanted to introduce a lot of like diversity between the characters in terms of body type, in terms of hair, like features and stuff. So I kind of, I was a bit methodical, where I kind of created a list of goals that I wanted to accomplish. And then I was like, okay, cool, how do I make this happen? And then kind of worked on from there. The most important for me was to just make them look really fun and quite distinct from each other, so that whenever you just look at any of the characters, you can always like get a feel of their personality almost immediately, kind of, and just really have fun with the character designs. But also I'm really lucky because me and Ramsey have been friends for a few years. So he already knew what my references are, what my inspirations are, and the kind of stuff that I like to draw. So he really did a really good job kind of writing the script tailored to my taste and my strengths as well. So it was a very, like, I feel that we make a really good team. So he made my job way easier.
Wonderful. Anna, I want to come to you next because, again, you've done work on strips like Judge Anderson, as well as newly originated stuff for Regened. I wanted to get your sense of how you interact in your head with the past 45 years, with all the artists that have come before, or whether it's you wanting to do your own thing.
You see, it's interesting, right? I'll come back to Judge Anderson a bit later, but I'll probably start with my first gig for 2000 AD. It was the Future Shock. At that time, I knew and anticipated that when you knew, you're coming in into existing kind of environment, existing fan base. So there was a little bit of pressure at that time. But I will always say, I've been saying this, what I really enjoy about 2000 AD is that it's the publication that allows this incredible creative freedom. So your personal artistic voice is very much appreciated generally. So I was very lucky when I actually found out that that Future Shock was received very well. In fact, I didn't really anticipate. I thought it would be a little bit unnoticed, but when you get this feeling of, like kind of lifetime fans of 2000 AD coming to you and saying how much they enjoy your work, it really means the world. It really means that you've done something right. And what I always try to do is I acknowledge the legacy, and I acknowledge how much amazing content is there historically. So my focus when I do work is to make sure I do the best possible job I can to keep that legacy going and contribute in the best possible way. So but still with 2000 AD, every job I take, I try to tackle it slightly differently compared to the other jobs I've already done, just to kind of see and experiment a little bit and see how audience and how people react to this. So for example, if I work on terror tales or future shocks, they tend to be very dark. They're very black and white, contrasty, grim. When it's stuff for Regent, for example, such as Viva Forever, it's a little bit different style, or there's going to be a new strip coming out soon in the upcoming Regent, Lowborn High. On this one, I got the opportunity to do my own color work as well. So again, opens a completely different field to try something new and to showcase your abilities to people and see how people respond to this. But legacy characters are a little bit different because you see, it's an interesting experience when you get a chance to actually develop something your own and you get to draw something that's already in existence. And especially Judge Anderson, it's a very special character in the 2000 AD universe. It's got very special relationship with the audience as well. And to actually get an opportunity and turn a hand on this character and draw her, it was incredible. But you always anticipate a little bit of debate as well, because you know how 2000 AD, Judge Dredd universe characters, they age in real time as well. So everybody handles those characters differently. So I try to do my best, yet bring my kind of own voice to the character as well. And I really hope the audience enjoyed it. Well, so far I've heard good feedback, but yeah, I really hope that I did her justice.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, Tom and Dan, now, don't take this the wrong way.
Okay.
Which is always a great way to start a sentence, isn't it? When you ask a question. But both of your styles, for me, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, very strongly seem to connect to key 2000 AD artists. So, Tom, your work is always compared to Brian Bolland. Dan, I see Mick McMahon in your work quite strongly. And there's people who've clearly, been very influenced by 2000 AD. I wanted to get your sense of how that legacy has influenced you, and whether you get a sense of wishing to plug into that, or whether it's something that you're finding your own style within it, if you see what I mean. Tom, what do you think?
It is a good question, and obviously the whole issue of being influenced and wearing your influences on your sleeve can, the word clone does come up from time to time, but the way I feel like I know I'm very influenced by particularly Bolland, but there's a couple of other artists in there as well. Glenn Fabry, Chris Weston, other people who tend to sort of try and coax as much realism out of a slightly hyper real style as they can, and I do struggle with sometimes whether I've kind of got my own identity as an artist, but I think, for one thing, I'm a little bit less dependent than I used to be on studying just one artist. That was a problem from the outset, was that my drawing, even though I did go to art college, I'm another Dundee University alumnus, not the comics course, predate that a little bit, but the art college, Duncan of Jordanstone there. So I do have an art education, but most of my drawing influences, I was limiting myself to specifically comic artists and a handful of those. And then a few years ago, I was very reliant on using things like DAZ 3D and photo reference, things to kind of prop up my drawing skills, because at the back of my mind, I knew I wasn't a particularly strong or consistent draftsman. I could render quite well, but constructing stuff, particularly anatomy, I wasn't consistent enough to be able to do it every time and know that there was going to be something publishable at the end of it. So I just kind of sat down and started properly studying and giving myself as close to a kind of classical education in anatomy as I could, because when I went to art college, life drawing was just about to get thrown out the door, and all the kind of traditional drawing skills were getting pushed to one side by the faculty at that point. There was no emphasis on it at all. In fact, if there was an emphasis, it was that kind of stuff isn't really relevant anymore, but it's relevant to this job, very much so. So I realized I had to kind of give myself the education, get the books, study them, and do as good a job as I could as getting better at drawing, because that was the only way I was going to be able to compete with all the people that I admired who had learned things a bit, the traditional way. And it made a huge difference. And once my drawing ability improved, and I was able to just sit down rather than using 3D models. I could just sit down, sketch out my page, and then do my finished pencils and stuff. That was when I started to feel, okay, I'm still very influenced by certain artists, but I'm not defined by them in the same way. Like whatever's coming out, it is my drawing. And I've always kind of felt like unless you make a specifically considered decision to do something in a stylistic way, like to give your character certain cartoonish proportions or exaggerate certain things every time, unless you're making the decision to do that, your style comes out of basically the mistakes you make, or the things that like you never quite get quite right, or a little bit stiff or whatever, because if you're aiming for, well, that's what a person looks like, or that's what, forms look like, your style will generally come out of the stuff that's specific to you, not being able to 100% get your head around it. That's the style I like. That's why I gravitate towards Bolland and that in the first place, is because they draw the way I like to draw, just better. So I might as well at least try and move in that direction.
It's fascinating. I mean, that's why I asked the question, and why I wanted to talk about this on this panel is it's that interplay. And Anna,
I think the point that Tom's made is absolutely great. As he said, that sometimes it's like the little things you can't quite get your head around that bring the unique voice to your work. And I've noticed that throughout, reading comics and looking at people's work, sometimes if it's not 100% ideal, correct, and accurate, this is actually what gives the work authenticity. This is what makes it live. So it's just not completely, overproduced, over worried about it. Actually, sometimes it can be like a little slip.
Yeah.
But it helps to maintain and retain the energy in the work, and it keeps it very humane, because I think this is important. We're not robots. And I'm pretty sure in the future AI will be able to draw comics for us. So these little missteps and maybe mistakes from an artist's point of view, but not from the reader's point of view, is exactly what keeps the reader's attention, and they can they can connect with a specific artist. I think it's was it Mick McMahon who was actually making this point as well back in the day? He said, somebody asked him if this was a special stylistic choice he went for when he was drawing Dredd in a certain way, and he said, no, it's actually I couldn't figure out the anatomy. But this is what actually gave this iconic look to the character drawn by Mick McMahon, the way we know it these days. So,
Dan, what's your feeling on this?
I think it's hard not to be influenced by, the people I've grown up reading and looking at. I think you're generally going to be influenced by the artist you love. I think my style's very. You said Mick McMahon. I don't see that personally, but that's because it's my work. Mine, I think, because I'm influenced by so many. If I'm doing a story that relies on getting reference from a previous story, especially like in the Citadel and Warbuds before, I will go through my graphic novels and pick up a story that a certain thing appears in. And then as soon as I see that, I'm instantly influenced by the artwork of that story. So, I think my style is probably a mashup of Carlos, of Mick, of Henry Flint, of so many that I've been influenced by. And when I pick up a book, the other day I picked up Mick McMahon Slain, and I was just, drooling over this artwork, thinking that's how I want to draw. But if you try to force something like that, it never comes out looking natural, and your own style will eventually come through anyway. Mm-hmm. I think we all pick up something from different artists along the way, but if you go all out replicate other artists' styles, you're probably on to a losing streak, if you like, because your own style has to come through eventually, and it generally does. You know, like I say, when I pick up books and I'm sitting there drawing and I need to reference something and I see some Mick or Carlos's, even in the Citadel, someone pointed out that one of the Dredd poses I did, it goes, oh, that's definitely a Carlos Dredd. I didn't personally go. It's because I was reading, my reference was right next to me and I was looking at it. It just kind of came out, I suppose. What amazes me about those artists from back then is, you know, I rely on reference now. You know, you really should, you know, poses, and my camera's full of horrendous pictures of myself trying to look cool and hard and all of this. And they never had that in the day. You know, I remember listening to one of your interviews, and they were going to libraries to pick up books for reference. And we've got the internet now, and you know, apps on your pads for posing and this and the other. Whereas they never had any of that. So you have to look at them. You know, this standing on the shoulders of giants story, you know, saying is so true, because you look at how they produced the stunning work that they did without effectively the tools we have nowadays. Like I say, I'm influenced by them 100%. Not one particular artist. You know, it's a multitude of artists I'm influenced by, and if that comes out in my work, then it's effectively a tribute to them, basically, because I don't do it consciously. It's something that just happens because I've been reading it for 30 years. So, and you know, there's artists from the States or France who influence my style or my process in doing it. But you know, I am 100% influenced by the artists from 2000 AD over the years, particularly the Dredd artists and whatnot. And you know, if it comes out my work, then that can only be a good thing. But as long as my style is a predominant thing, you see. If you see a picture of some of my work and they go, oh, there's definitely a Mick McMahon look to that panel or that Dredd or that character or Carlos or whoever, then that's a good thing. But as long as it's not people saying, oh, it's just a clone of such and such, then I'm doing something right, I think. You know, it's good to be influenced, but not to clone.
I think your greatest moment so far is plugging into Ron Smith's style of drawing Dredd's arse. Of course, you did Naked City, where
oh god,
running around with no clothes on, and you know, I looked at one of those panels. I went, Ron Smith also had a thing for Dredd's butt, so you know.
Yeah. But the thing is, it's because Dredd, you know, I like those kind of upshots. I'm always going for these upshots because, I don't know, it looks cinematic or whatever. And Dredd wears tight clothes, so he's always got his butt.
I think if there was one story we didn't want upshots, that was definitely
yeah. Well, even the script, when Kenneth, the main script came in and I was reading it, and it says that the girl that was sitting on the floor and Dredd was protecting her, and he said her face is right next to his butt. And I thought, how am I going to do this without showing too much?
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Anyway, moving on. Korinna, I wanted to just come back to you because what I love about the Harlem Heroes reboot is that, as you mentioned, you know, it takes elements from the original, but also does something different with them that plays to your style. I wondered what your influences were beyond 2008, because your style is, you know, it's not something we've really seen in 2000 AD before. So I wanted to get an idea of where you were coming from.
Yeah, I was basically raised on a steady diet of mostly the Franco-Belgian comics. So like ever since I could remember, I've always had a book of Asterix in my hand. Because the best thing about growing up in Greece is that you can buy comics everywhere, because we've got these like kiosks where you can go buy chocolates. It's kind of like a corner shop type thing, but you can always find like Asterix, Lucky Luke, like Tintin. But you can also find the Disney comics. So I was mostly reading, European comics plus Disney stuff. And then when I was 13, I discovered manga and never looked back. So I've just been like, I got into like Western comics fairly late. So I didn't really grow up with superheroes aside from the cartoons. So most of my influences primarily come from manga. But obviously like with a more sort of like European influence to it. But generally I have a similar approach to Dan where I will sort of like, whenever I have a new project where I'm not entirely sure what I want to do, I just kind of go to my library, pick something up that catches my eye, and then whether on purpose or not, I do end up being quite influenced by it. So it really depends a lot of the time on what I'm reading at the time, or if I want to have a specific effect, I will like always try and find someone that has done it before and try to kind of like, not exactly steal, but like kind of borrow elements of their style to try to integrate into my work as well. But yeah, for Harlem Heroes, for example, like one of my all-time favorite artists is Wimberly. And I was just like, I just want to draw like him. He's just a master, I think, and in my opinion. So I was just very much like influenced by him while I was working on Harlem Heroes, because his color, like especially his color palette, because it does like he does work in this very sort of like oversaturated kind of, but like he really plays around with different like hues and color balances and kind of like just colors you wouldn't necessarily see in, for example, a skin tone. He works a lot with purples and blues rather than pinks and browns type thing. So it was very much like drawn to that.
That merging of influences outside of necessarily 2000 AD. That I looking at your artwork, like I said, it's not a style that I think we've seen an awful lot of, whether in 2000 or in the graphic novels.
When you see artwork coming in, can you see the people who are influenced by 2000 AD and the people who are not? When you see the artwork coming in, as you say, her work's not like a 2000. It's totally different to what you normally see in, and that must be a good thing, because then you're not getting carbon copies of everything. It makes the prog totally different week in, week out.
Yeah, I mean, this ultimately is the point that I wanted to come on to, which is about the future, and about the comics landscape now is completely different to what it was 45 years ago. And all too often, I think whether they still read 2000 AD or they read it back in the 80s, I often see people wanting the comic to be almost preserved in aspic, to have been the same thing that it always was. And the lineup with all of you for this panel speaks to me as a changing times, changing styles, new identities, new people coming in. And I can see influences because I grew up with 2000 AD as well, so it's kind of imprinted onto my brain. So it's almost the lens through which I see everything. Not so great sometimes. But I wanted to get a sense of the future and how we reckon with the past while moving on. If you see what I mean. Tom, I just want to come back to you for this and get your sense of on new generations and new styles and moving forward.
I think it's important to study what new ground is being broken in terms of drawing comics and the like you get at the moment there's a lot of people, usually it's kind of driven by what's possible with the technology that people have, because if it was just a case of kind of intellectual innovation, there's a fair chance that somebody would have come up with it or something, like something approximating it 30 or 40 years ago. But as soon as a new as soon as there's a technological advancement that allows people to explore new territory, that's normally when you get an influx of ideas. So there's people now who are doing some kind of amazing stuff with digital color that in the kind of first run era of digital coloring either wasn't as possible, or people, when digital coloring first started, people were just getting to know the tools, and things would generally have like a particular look. And then as people sort of got used to coloring digitally and start reevaluating, well, what actually works in color terms for a story, and isn't just however much mileage we can milk out of the new set of technology, things start to kind of get a bit of a broader brief, and people explore more creative decisions rather than being driven by the technology. So that's one side of things, is being aware of what's coming out. You also kind of have to study the past stuff, because the thing that's most crucial really creatively is knowing what's the right decision for whatever project you're working on. And sometimes that right decision will involve using fairly advanced, contemporary techniques. Sometimes it'll involve more traditional methods. The bigger a kind of palette of resources you have to work with, the better the output's going to be, because you're able to make the right choice for the project. So, for example, like in rendering terms, obviously Bolland's my big influence. Like that's how I ink generally, and like my line work is very influenced by Bolland. But Bolland isn't really my main kind of storytelling influence. For that, I would look more towards somebody like Lee Weeks, who has a traditional approach, but is more contemporary artist. And I can use digital resources to make for more interesting shot choices sometimes. Like, I'll be like, well, it's going to be really difficult to draw this entire scene from a 3/4 angle from above, or set everything inside a very cramped space and keep it dynamic. So I can use 3D tools to kind of mock it up and use it as a kind of meta photo reference, in order to like have a slightly broader selection of things to work from. But there's influences from different, like for every aspect of it, there's an influence from a different generation of artists. And that would generally be my philosophy, or my approach to working in any evolving medium like this, is that you kind of have to have a fairly firm grip on both the past and the future to deliver the best possible thing.
I always find it very difficult to when I done my first Dredd, I went all out to change his Lawmaster and his gun and this, and to put my own mark on it. And some people liked it, a lot of people didn't, because it's not the Lawmaster. It's not the way Bolland drew it, or Mick, or Carlos. So I find it very hard to keep it traditional looking, a traditional Judge Dredd story, without adding some sort of, I don't know, Akira aesthetics to it, because I love all of those works, but you have to make them look relatively modern, because you have to keep the audience there. And if you're drawing, if the comics all looked like they came from the 70s, the chances are people won't be picking them up from the stand, because the readership gets older and older, and we need to attract the younger readers. So you have to make it appealing to them. And if it looks like it's from the 70s, it might not be appealing to them.
I mean, this is the I guess what we're moving towards is what's the essence of 2000 AD that it can absorb all these different styles and all these different ways of doing things. I mean, you know, you mentioned about the Lawmaster, like everyone's got their own take on the on the Lawmaster. What is it about 2000 AD and that freedom that that Anna mentioned earlier that means it has existed for 45 years and you know is going from whether people believe it or not, is going from strength to strength. You know, what's the kernel, what's the essence of it, do we think?
Well, it's an anthology, isn't it, to start? So it allows for varied art styles and stories, and whereas many other comics might not have. They're willing to experiment, try new things, and these, you know, like I said earlier, it's may not be, you know, people could pick up the comic and some of it might not be someone's cup of tea, or in some cases they may be incredibly offended by what they're looking at or reading. But that's the point of 2000 AD. It's got to, if it became stagnant, it wouldn't exist. It would die out, like a lot of other comics have. So it allows for creators to experiment and try and push the boundaries, and that's why it's successful, because that punk attitude from the 70s is still going strong now. It's just the punks from the 70s are now in their 60s and you know, they still buy it and they still enjoy it. They have strong words about it sometimes, or you know, pleasant words about it. It allows us to do what we want to do and try things. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work, but that's the point of it, isn't it? It's an anthology. There's always going to be something in there you like, or there's probably going to be something there you dislike.
Anna, I can see you nodding away all the way through that.
Nodding away.
Yeah. What's your take? What's the essence of 2008?
Do you know what? I actually wrote it down on a sticky note. I very much agree with Tom on a point he made earlier on about the palette of resources. And I think for 2000 AD creators, it is in particular, and in creators in general, but in 2000 AD, it's very important to keep this palette as diverse as possible. And you need to be very, very respectful of what's been done prior you came into the scene. But you also need to be in the loop of how the artistic environment is changing around us, just as Tom said. But here's one thing as well. See, with technology, it comes, technology also brings this kind of openness to so many voices. But what technology also can do is to limit us to certain specific channels. For example, if you interact with certain content, it kind of sort of puts you in a pool with it when it shows you very similar content as well. Because if this is what you like, we will show you something similar. And this is a danger of content becoming quite derivative when you're constantly sitting in this kind of bubble surrounded by the same type of references, same type of styles. So I think it's very important to be switched on, and as soon as you kind of see that you've been influenced by same type of thing for a little bit too long, is to go and search for an entirely opposite reference. Either go back through archives of like amazing art that was done before. It may not even be style you're particularly into, but through the difference, you will be able to see how you can make your own work more creative. Again, I will repeat myself and say that 2000 AD in particular, Rebellion is an amazing platform where you're allowed this voice and where you're allowed this experimentation. So I think it's important to use it with responsibility and with respect and with creative approach. So you don't become too caught up you don't become too stagnant in the references you're familiar with, but you can also like push yourself a little bit further and therefore challenge the audience as well a little bit, because 2000 AD is pretty much about the challenge in general. So I think if we have this opportunity, we have to use it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we have come to the end of our time. So thank you to all four of you for what has been an absolutely absorbing chat. Some wonderful insights there. So yes, thank you to Tom, to Korinna, to Anna, and to Dan for a great panel. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Absolutely
Thank you.
fantastic. Thank you.